All right. Welcome to the February 11th work session of the Board of the Village of Trustees. I'll begin with some remarks about last week's village board meeting and then move into some interesting developments that have come up this week. There was a somewhat heated exchange at last week's board meeting between some members of this board, and comments were made at the time by a community member. And I've heard since from other community members that there was concern about the manner in which some of us spoke to each other. And I am certainly not someone to shy away from conflict. If you attended or have read my speech from Inauguration Day, I spoke about how conflict can be very healthy for our community. And all of us on this board, I believe, do at the heart have the same intention, which is to serve the community well. I was elected by all of the voters and the residents of Ossining to serve as your mayor and represent you here on the board. Another part of my role here is as the chairperson of all of our public meetings. And one of the first things I did was ask Assistant Village Manager Christina Papes to order me a copy of Robert's Rules of Order. And I invited all of my colleagues to get a copy for themselves as well. And I've been doing some reading in here, and I thought I would just read a brief passage tonight about that rule. A chairperson should never be stricter than is necessary for the good of the meeting. But within that pattern, parliamentary procedure should normally be followed as a matter of course if it is to work well. It's not something to look to only when you get into trouble. The chairperson enforces the rules and designates who is to speak at any given time. Well, Ossining is steeped in tradition and custom, and I've attended many board meetings over the years. I've come to realize that there are some things that we do in our meetings that are not exactly as Robert's Rules of Order would dictate. So you may see that we do things a little bit differently going forward as I become more familiar with how we may want to conduct meetings slightly differently. But one thing that will be consistent is that the chairperson designates who is able to speak at any given time. And I would ask that all of us in elected office, when we speak to each other or to anyone, that there is no shaming of anyone else, as long as we are all speaking with sincerity and doing our best to express what we believe to be true, whether it is an opinion or a statement of fact, that we do not have any suggestion that a colleague should not be opening their mouth, and that there will be no verbal beating of someone who sees the world or a particular issue differently from ourselves. Let us all strive to conduct ourselves in a manner that is respectful of the people we represent and the offices we hold. Okay, moving on. I had a wonderful phone call this morning from Congresswoman Nita Lowey. She called to let me know what you may already know now from the news, which is that she and Governor Cuomo put together an agreement, which is very favorable to us in Ossining. You may be aware that there was quite a lawsuit between the federal government and the county regarding HUD funding, and the result of that was that we were lumped together with all of the other members of a consortium that we previously had partnered with so that we could gain access to federal funding for community development block grants. And as a result of the case, $22 million was lost and was not able to be distributed among our communities. We were concerned that once this consortium was dissolved and we could move on and the funding was available again, the concern was that we would be competing with municipalities across New York State for whatever funding the state was providing. The great news that we found out this week, and correct me if I'm expressing anything inaccurately, Richard or Lori Lee, but it's $5 million that's designated specifically for Westchester County. And it'll be, and the words of Congresswoman Lowey, in a lockbox and communities, I know we all love that term, don't we? And the communities like ours who are too small to apply directly to the federal government for funds, we're not going to be competing with cities like Yonkers and New Rochelle and White Plains. We're going to be competing with other communities like ours to have access to that $5 million. And so that is a really great development. And I don't know if Valerie is going to be able, our village planner might speak to it, not right this moment, but I know we have so many things that we've worked on. If we don't get to any of those to discuss today, I'm sure that you've already been looking into what this could mean for us. And I look forward to seeing how we can renew our efforts to apply for those fundings for us. And I will just say two more things, and then I'll open up to the floor to my colleagues here on the board for any other announcements. We are between storms right now. I want to thank the DPW workers for doing incredible work to keep our roads clear and safe for all of us. And then even once we had a couple of days without the storm, going out and picking up and removing the piles of snow that were in the way to make our streets wider again. And I thank everyone in the community who has been compliant with when we've had snow emergencies twice in anticipation of the storms, to be able to keep the roads clear. That's really important so that not just the roads are clear for all of us when it's time for us to go out, but for our first responders to be able to respond to emergencies. It's really essential that we have major roadways clear. So thank you for complying with that. And I will let folks know on Tuesdays, on Tuesdays I am here in Village Hall from 10 until 12 for open office hours. And I do it every week. And this week I actually had a line of people waiting. So I figured if I just kept doing it, it would start to catch on. And you don't have to make an appointment. Just please stop by. I will say I have school children. So if there's a snow day, if there's a snow day, that's really a problem. But if it's just a snow delay, I'll be a little bit delayed. So I'll be here at 11. And I hope you do join me. There's no appointment necessary right here at 16 Croton Avenue, Tuesdays, usually at 10 a.m., assuming we don't have any more snow delays. Any more announcements? Would you like to? All right, well, I'll let everybody know. The Snow Angels is a very newly formed group of people. If you or someone you know is disabled or for any reason needs particular assistance with snow removal during storms, this is a program that's been organized by the Ossining Rotary, and Ossining High School students will come and at no charge for folks who are in need of special help with snow removal, come and shovel your walkway or your driveway. So there are there's a lot of contact information here, but I will just give you one phone number and email address. That's 914-762-5760, extension 2371. That's for Brian Piazza, who's the ninth grade Ossining High School counselor leading the Ossining Snow Angels. And Brian Piazza's email address is bpiazza, BPIAZZA, at ossining.k12.ny.us. I'll give you that contact again, 914-762-5760, extension 2371, email bpiazza at ossining.k12.ny.us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will also be having office hours in this room at 16 Croton Avenue next Wednesday, February 18th from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. All are welcome to just walk in. It's right here at Village Hall, and you could always reach me online at omarjherrera.com, Facebook, Omar J. Herrera, and it's the same name for Twitter, Instagram, and all the other social media outlets. There's a special event being held at Westchester Community College on February 25th. It's the Westchester Working with Immigrants Winter Assembly. It's a major program now that's being highlighted throughout the state, and it's going to be on Wednesday, February 25th from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. It's free, and it's a great program and training. However, they do require that you RSVP and register at nyjc.org. And I also wanted to point out, if you're an Ossining resident, no matter where you are in the village, if you see garbage or if you see anything that shouldn't be, to please give the village a call. And also, if you're walking around and you see some garbage, please help our community to stay clean and just pick it up and throw it in the garbage or in your home. Thank you.
Okay. So, I was hoping that last week wasn't going to be brought up, but it was. And I'm simply going to say a couple of things. First, this board is 5 people, each of whom has 1 vote. No one outranks anybody else. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if I am attacked, I will slap back 10 times as hard every time, without exception, continuously, until the behavior stops. I'm not going to change my behavior. I'm not going to be abused. This board is divided. There is contention between the members, and it shows in the way we deal with each other. I will endeavor to get past my personal feelings towards some of these people in order to do my job to represent the people of Ossining that I'm here to do. I won't let it get in the way. But that said, when I think what's being said is inappropriate, I will not hesitate to speak up. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. That said, and moving on, we've got a lot of work to do. And we should be getting to it. So I would say this: if anybody wants to talk to me, I don't have office hours. If you want to see me, pick up the phone, call 914-774-2646, and I will arrange to meet with anyone, anytime, anywhere that needs to speak with me. I'm on Facebook. It's Robert DeRaio, D-A-R-A-I-O. You can leave me a message there. You can email me at our village address. It's rDeRaio@villageofossining.com or .org. But 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I work for the people of Ossining. You can contact me when you need me, and I will show up. Thank you.
Actually, I do have something else to add. There was an incident, not an incident, a tragedy that happened last week on a train going back, coming from New York City. And I just want to thank our fire department that was part of that tragedy, helping out the commuters in there. We had 2 firehouses, and I could be mistaken, but I think it was 44, ladder 44?
41?
No, 42, ladder 42, and I can't remember the other department, but I want to thank our fire department for all the hard work that they do, not just in the village of Ossining, but outside the village of Ossining. As well, I want to send my condolences to the family that we lost, a resident here from the town, I believe it was from the town of Ossining. I cannot remember the gentleman's name, but I said all my, I'm sorry?
Joseph Nadal.
Thank you. I want to send all my condolences to his family, and if there's anything that we can do for them, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We have an interesting agenda this evening with much business for the village board to consider. The first item is a update and discussion on construction management oversight. It's cement water relining, which the village periodically does in order to clean the existing water mains and also to reline them to bring them up to current standards. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew Teese, the superintendent of water.
Good evening, Mayor and Board.
Good evening.
What you have before you is a proposal from Maganaro Engineers. This proposal is for construction management and office services for the next phase of our water relining project, along with some new main installation work. I have with us tonight Shalish Naik. He is the owner of Maganaro Engineering, and he's going to talk about the scope a little bit and where we stand as far as cost. There's also an engineer's estimate that's in the back of this packet, which we've already borrowed $2.6 million for. So without further ado, I'll have Shalish come up and talk about it.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the Board of Trustees. Let me just get this. Okay. Just want to elaborate what is involved in the current project. It entails cleaning and cement mortar lining of approximately 9,200 linear feet of water mains. They are two sizes, 6 and 8 inches, and they're spread throughout the village on Hunter Street, James Street, Seco Road, Barlow Lane, Tompkins Avenue, Easter Avenue, Elizabeth Street, Prospect Place, Churchill Street, and Walden Road. These are all cement mortar lining. The project also has a part where it is replacement of about 640 linear feet of 6-inch diameter water mains with 12-inch diameter water mains. Now this was important because right now the main that is there, which is 6 inches, is undersized, and just by making it from 6 to 12, the flow actually quadruples. That's because of the hydraulics. So it will be helpful for the future purposes because of development and stuff like that. So that's the whole project. The project cost is approximately $2.6 million, and engineering was already approved for it, so it's already done. The current proposal that you have in front of you is for office and field services during construction for a total of $146,000. The village actually decided to finalize the scope of work because for some work on Hunter Street, there could be an alternate source of funding. So what we did is in our proposal, in our documents, we put an add or delete alternative. So in case the village decides to go with it, we'll be actually using that item, and it will be paid for by the alternate source. If the village ever decides not to do the work, it can just be taken out, and the contract can be finished. And if the cost for that is approximately $350,000 to $380,000. So, Andy, you want to say anything?
We actually had a meeting today with the village manager and the planner and the engineer to talk about alternate source funding for this. And there's the CHIPS program that's being offered by the state that we're going to apply for this project for some of those streets that fall into that area. And also, obviously, the planners in negotiations with the prospective people for Hunter and James, and see if they'll pay their fair share, which they should. So we're looking at all avenues to get funding, and it's the right project. It needs to be done. We were originally supposed to start this project last year, but what happened was if we bid it that late in the season, which would have been like the middle of the summer, we would have been dealing with this winter. So the project takes about 30 weeks to accomplish. So most likely it's going to go into 2 separate seasons. And I believe that's it. So if one thing I did want to say is Corporation Council is reviewing the bid specs right now for this project concurrently with what we're looking at with this contract. And if we can get this onto, if the board approves this project, with Megan Arrow, we should do it ASAP. I'd like to try and bid this project by the end of March, beginning of April, so that we'd be ready for the construction season middle of May. Any questions?
Couple questions on the funding. You mentioned the CHIPS grant. Now, would that be CHIPS money that would be specifically for this project, as opposed to the other CHIPS money that we've been getting for the sidewalks and
Yeah,
in the
I'm just
past?
going to explain that. As the mayor mentioned today, that there was an announcement from the governor's office
Sure.
about $5 million through the federal government. There was also an announcement within 24 hours, and I'm not sure which one came first, through the county, through Astorino's program, which is what they're entitling this, the CHIPS program, which is also another $5 million. Both pots of funds are going to be towards communities that have not been able to get their CDBG projects funded. So we've already been contacted by the county to start coming in with looking at the projects that we've already put forth in the previous CDBG rounds, and one of them has been the water relining. So we do anticipate, or we're hoping, that we'd be able to receive some funds to help with alleviate some of those costs. And then also with 34 State Street, they were approved at the planning board last week, And that, as part of their negotiations or part of their approvals and their density bonuses, they will be doing some of the water relining for both James Street and Hunter Street. So that will also help offset some of the costs for this project.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. The other question I had was, this particular project, it comes under the water budget, is that correct?
Yes, the water capital.
Okay, so it's not part of the
paid for
general
out of-
fund, this is water infrastructure.
Correct.
Obviously, making sure we keep our water system strong and supporting and doing all the things it's supposed to do. I would imagine that the other benefit of widening that pipe would be that the obviously increased hydraulics, but it would be also good for the fire hydrants and the water pressure in the hydrants. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. The actual the flows in most of this area are less than 500 gallons a minute. So
Right.
once it's relined, or once the new main's installed, it's well over 1,000.
Right.
So that's a
So for
that's a
fire
good point.
service-
That's a major driving force.
Right.
Besides water quality and
Right.
and yeah.
Now, I just wanted to point that out because I know that's something that obviously the water not only is provided to the houses and everybody wants good water pressure, but it also has a whole fire service element to it as well, and allowing our firefighters to have all the tools they need to do their job. So.
It's also, as far as efficiency, when we did our last project on Underhill Road a couple of years ago, there was such a restriction in the piping that we had to change the impellers at the pump stations because there was that much resistance. So by changing the impellers and dropping the flows to where they needed to be, it was a huge savings in electricity. So it's just resistance throughout the system.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Bob, did you have any questions? Just
good,
because it's
thank
on
you.
Hunter Street, you usually have
What's
a
that?
comment. It's on you're directly impacted on Hunter Street, so you
Well,
usually have a comment on this
I
project.
can say this, for 15 years, the water on Hunter Street is brown and chunky unless you run it through a whole house filter system. So this project being done will save us a lot of money because the filters on my whole house water system that are supposed to be changed annually have to be changed 4 times a year because of the amount of rust and stuff in the water. So by reducing that will save the homeowners a lot of money, and I'm thrilled.
Yeah, Hunter Street itself is closed down to like 1 inch in certain areas. When we've had water main breaks, we've cut the pipe into sections. It's closed down that much, and it affects the prison. Once the prison uses higher flows in the summertime, then it'll stir up that whole area.
Absolutely.
So that's
We're very
90%
excited.
of the water quality calls are that area.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Thanks. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Please move it forward. Sounds good.
Okay, great, thank you. The next item on the agenda is a discussion on the request from the Austin Police Department to upgrade the existing access control system at the police court facility on Spring Street. During the budget process and deliberations, the chief came in as part of his presentation to ask for an upgrade for the existing system there, which controls access through doors and other security aspects at the building. A small amount of money, according to the treasurer, was put aside, not sufficient to cover the approximately $25,000 cost of this project, in hopes that it could be band-aided, if you will, and made to have a longer useful life. In fact, the chief is back this evening to discuss that system with you, and he's looking for an allocation, as suggested by the treasurer, from the contingency account in order to upgrade the system. So, Chief?
Thank you. What did Andy want, 3 million? I want 25? Come on. Yeah.
Different
You won't
budget,
even
though.
notice.
Different budget, chief, now. Come on now.
You can take it for water, too. I don't care. As Richard said, we were in budget. We placed this on as a high priority. And someplace along, I thought it was approved, but when we got the budget, I looked at capital expenses, it wasn't there. Tom Carpenter behind me is my IT if you need any technical stuff, but basically the system has been in place since the building was erected. So it's a 15-year. Pete, if I get it wrong, just nudge. We are going to take a server, not use the present server that we use and take a server that we have already to save some money, and put the intelligent controllers in that, and then replace all the interface cards. It's the swipe system that you get through is security. If the computer went down, all the locks unlock. It's like having a fire in the building. When you pull the alarm in the fire, the system shuts down, the doors will go into an open stage. So it would be no security in the building at all. And that's it. It's right now, it's around, round figures of 25, and we're reducing it a little bit.
So can you just describe the current status of the system, what's there? You know, what is the issue that brings you to make the request?
The current status is that Pete tells me it hiccups, and he'll explain hiccup.
I think it's running on like a server that's running Windows 87 or something along those lines. But it'll freeze up. I'll go up. I'll hit a button on the keyboard to free it up, and literally stand there for probably 5 minutes to wait for the screensaver to shut down. And the program will come up. I'll input maybe a last name. Go to the next box. It'll freeze up. So it's just really a ticking time bomb, ready to fail, and it's beyond its life. We tried the obvious of just replacing the server and the software, but due to the modern technology, the control boards have to be replaced. The door swipes, the actual swipe spot where you hit your card, they stay in place. All the wiring stays in place. So it's really the core mechanics of the system. And like the chief said, we're going to repurpose a server, which is saving us, probably close to $3,000 by doing that. And then, we'll get new software and everything with it. So that's the project.
Go ahead, John.
Has Craig, is he involved in this, or you guys take care of this internally at the police department?
Yeah.
Okay, so you take care of it. I guess my only question is you meant, it's indicated you were budgeted $5,000 in the operating budget already to, I guess, Band-Aid this thing, right? Is that, did that money get expended, or?
No, still, it had, I think it was put in capital and has been used.
Okay, so there was $5,000 that was set aside for this purpose, but then you used it for another capital purpose? Is that what you're saying?
No, we haven't
It's
used
still
it at
there.
all.
Oh, okay, no, because I just want to understand how the money works.
The thing is when it went to the budget to get the numbers that I
Right.
would need to start it,
Mhm.
and I saw $5,000, I went, oh, I thought typo error, they forgot to put the 2 in, and I found out it wasn't, so.
It was intended to put $5,000 aside to try to make it available for repairs, but according to a memo that Tom had sent over, that money is not really there. So it was used
What, the
during...
$5,000 is not
Right,
there?
right. That's what he had sent over.
So we budgeted $5,000, and
It's been used, according to his memo, it was used for purposes of keeping the tax increase below the tax cap. He indicates it was effectively eliminated. So whether it's actually there or whether it may be committed to other projects, it's not clear, but in
okay,
his...
well, I guess I have no objection to doing it. There's a housekeeping thing. I'm just not sure about the $5,000, but I'm happy to have you do it. I think my only question is this new technology? Is this new software? Will we expect to have any future costs related to this? I guess my attitude is if we're going to do this, let's make sure it's something that's going to give us some. Obviously, we've used the system. I mean, if you're on Windows 86, I mean, obviously we've extracted every dollar out of that
I mean,
expense.
we've
So-
used and abused that system. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation, obviously.
Sure, yeah.
And any door, you could have 2 swipes on one door to go one way or the other.
Sure.
So it's gotten its use, and I think with the current system, we've had maybe 2 or 3 service calls since, that I
So-
can remember, and it's
so-
minimal,
Listen, the look back is great. We've extracted every dollar from that investment. I'm just asking about this investment of the $24,000 and your
Hoping that we
your
get
comfort
something.
level that this is something that's good, it's best practices, that good stuff. That's the comfort level I want to have, and I'm happy to spend the money because I know it's important. That's all.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the quotes provided, and, so, when vendors come in, they ask you, do you want, the low end? No, I want the high end on this, because
Sure.
this is an integral part of our building, so, we did get high-end quotes. good equipment.
It's going to go out for bid?
New York
No.
State contract.
Oh, contract, okay. No problem.
Which saves us.
That-
And we did get, but we also got other prices, and the other prices were $3,000 or $4,000 more than.
In the state contract.
Yeah.
And what's the expected lifespan for the new system? You said it was about 15 years we've gotten out of the
Out of the
initial one.
first
Yes.
You know, with increases in technology and stuff, I could only imagine it would be longer. You know, I would hope it would be longer,
Oh, yeah. Is that how it works?
unfortunately.
So you won't come back next year for another $25,000 for this? No?
I'm not gonna lock myself out.
And,
God
and,
forbid, you never know.
and so if the, even the $5,000 that we thought had been set aside for this was not, so there's been no money set aside for this, there was a mention of it potentially coming out of the contingency budget. Is that the police department contingency budget?
No, it's
The
That's
general
the village
fund.
contingency
Yes,
budget.
General
Okay.
fund.
They don't have a slush fund.
I wouldn't call it that. Okay.
So basically, Tom suggests that the dollar amount, and it's Lindstar is the corporation that's off the New York State, and we've dealt with them before satisfactorily. Tom suggested a resolution authorized the transfer from the contingency fund. The contingency account, he indicates, has a balance of $267,550, and then the deduction would leave it at approximately $240,000. So,
okay.
Did you have something you wanted to say, Trustee Herrera?
I did. I'm in full support of it. I mean, I know that from the little that I do know of all those systems, most of them are changed every 8 to 10 years or less. So I'm glad that you pointed out how we're going to pay for it. That was my question, and where it's going to come out since the money wasn't in the budget. But besides that, I'm happy that we're investing in the future of our department and to make sure that it functions and operates with the times. I mean, because Windows 87 that's got to go. So it's time. Thank you.
I agree, we should do this.
Okay.
Did you have any comment? Thank you, Chief. Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you.
Officer
I wasn't so
Kupfer.
afraid of getting the server crashing, I would look up the actual version of Windows, but I only do what I have to do with one. Thank you.
Should I be expecting an agreement from Lindstar?
We have a proposal, we'll get it up to you.
Probably next
Perfect.
week, so.
Perfect.
Okay.
Alrighty, so we'll move ahead with resolutions authorizing the execution of the agreement and also with the transfer from the contingency. All right, the next item is a further discussion on green buildings and green buildings code. The village recently had a presentation on green buildings zoning and codes that are contained in a couple of other municipalities. So Valerie Monaster, our planner, is here tonight to continue the discussion.
Okay, good evening. So I wanted to put this back on the work session agenda. I mean, clearly we had, I think, a successful green buildings topic work session last month. And I guess what I wanted to talk to this board about is basically following up with next steps. First of all, is this a priority project, and are you looking to take this project on this year? And then, if so, I would like to start talking about some of the next steps on, to undertake a type of project like this. I mean, clearly, I would assume we're going to have to form some sort of committee. So you would probably want certain stakeholders from the community dealing with, like, potentially business, community development, maybe some real estate. You're probably going to want your representatives from your various land use boards, including an EAC, planning board, HPC member, and then as well as somebody probably from the village board as a liaison throughout the project. And then, clearly staff would probably have to be involved. I would assume, maybe my department as a liaison to like this project and sort of spearheading the project, but then Paul Fraioli, the village engineer, Lori Lee Dixon, the attorney, and Al would also be involved as consultants to this process. So I guess I just wanted to start beginning this discussion with this board and then see where you want to go with this particular project.
Thanks, Valerie and I had a conversation in anticipation of tonight's board meeting, and pretty much that sums up our conversation. So I don't know if anybody else on the board has any thoughts on. This is definitely a priority for me. That's why I asked us to do it in a community community meeting, and I thought we had some really interesting presentations from two very different municipalities. Yonkers, which is so much larger than us and had a very different approach and experience from Hastings, but they were both very uniform in their experience, saying that it's been a really positive experience for them. They have some lessons that they can share with us. And I know that Valerie is familiar with both of the programs in those communities, and that they both had some pretty similar processes, which is reflected in the suggestion that Valerie has made on how we may want to move forward with gathering a team of people to consider this going forward. So, other comments? It looks like you have one,
Sure.
Trustee DeRio.
It has been my experience that unless you're standing in front of a vending machine, change is inevitable. And we need to make a change here in Ossining. We need to be more conscious of the environment, reduce our carbon footprint, and set an example for the rest of the community. The good news is we don't have to reinvent the wheel to do this. All of the systems are available and in place, so it just seems to me that the time is now to start implementing this. I am in full favor of it, and I think we should move forward expeditiously.
Right, well, I mean, yes, I agree with you. Although there's a lot of pieces and standards out there, there's a lot of decisions that would need to be made as how a program like this would work in the village of Ossining. Because each one of the communities that has created these types of green buildings, some applied them to various different developments throughout the community, some applied them to certain zoning districts, some also, depending on what types of standards you're going to want, the process in which those get verified or not verified. So there's a lot of, when you start dealing with the technicalities of it, it starts becoming a much more complex type of task, although it's not, clearly it's not unsurmountable, but it's not something that you can just take another community's, policies and then say, we're just going to go with it. Also, because of the other thing too is that the Village of Ossining already has certain green buildings codes already in their zoning regulations. So as part of this whole process, we'd have to take a look at that and see if we're going to shift, because some of those are actually deals with incentives and density bonuses. So that whole process would have to be opened up too. So no matter what, as you go through this process, you are going to be dealing with zoning code changes and probably, potentially some other code changes depending upon where they fall within your village code. So it is a little bit more of a complicated process, but it is definitely something that, we can utilize what other communities have done.
I didn't mean to make light of the amount of
No,
work
I just
involved
want
in
you
any
know.
way. I know it is a long process. It has many, many components, and Lord knows you're busy enough as it is. My thought is the sooner we start,
Right.
the sooner we'll get through it.
Yes,
And so I'm up for moving ahead on it. And I do understand that it's going to be a long road. We're not suddenly tomorrow going to be having gardens on the roof.
Would you like to comment?
Yes. I was going to say it would be great if our core team, which would be yourself and Paul and Andy and and Laura Lee and all the heads of our village, could first lay out the foundation on okay, so if we were to start this committee of residents, right? How do we go about that, right? So instead of we already have our ideas and our goals, but if we could determine and set up a timeline, a realistic timeline, that way residents won't expect, as Bob said, a garden on the roof by next month, and be more realistic and be part of the process and see how in depth it actually is and how many areas that we have to factor in and do research, and it's not just us talking in a group and asking you questions, and it's much more than that. We can definitely use other cities and municipalities as a resource, but I do feel that we do have all the resources within our village and experience within our village that could lead us in developing what a foundation will look like to develop a committee that will actually write the policy or begin the implementation of it. So I just think a timeline would be better once the core team can see what has to be done first. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, well, I can set out a timeline as to how long this project would be. Again, it's not really a set of, if you're going to do green buildings regulations, it has to be these particular standards. So it really becomes what the village wants to incorporate. So, for example, if the village decides to move forward with, certain buildings and dealing with the energy code. There's a new New York State energy code that's coming online it's supposed to be out a couple years ago, so ultimately soon. So one of the things you're going to want to look at is that New York State energy code, and then are there certain elements that you're going to want to increase and make more strict, or are you going to just adopt those as a whole? There's issues with, for example, Hastings decided to do with low VOC materials. Well, is that something that the village is going to want to do? And if we do that, how do we enforce something like that? So I think it's a little bit less than the staff necessarily coming to the board or the community saying, this is what we should do or what we can do. You can do many, many different options. It really starts becoming in what is our community? What do we want to see happen? For example, something like rain gardens. Rain gardens sound great, but then they're not really that great when you have really small lots. Because you end up needing a certain type of soil. You end up needing a certain amount of moisture, and so maybe those aren't necessarily the first things that we're going to try to, put on other communities. But you want to focus on other things like stormwater detention or those types of objects.
And those are the kind of considerations that this committee would be tasked with exploring and then presenting what makes sense for our community.
And that's where you get feedback from your development community, your business community, your different boards who are used to seeing certain projects constantly in front of them and say, okay, you know what, I always think that this is a problem or this is something we want to address. So that's how you would it's sort of organic to some extent.
And developing this committee, like you suggested, we may want to reach out to the EAC, the Planning Board, HBC, maybe the Zoning Board, the Chamber of Commerce, and the business community, to have all of those voices from the community helping to do this research and make these decisions preliminarily. And it's not so entirely different as perhaps John's experience. Would you mind speaking to your experience with the comprehensive plan, which is much broader?
Yeah, and that was... Yeah, but it's sort of like a miniature version of that because this type of policy decision, touches so many things. Is there a SECRA or
ultimately there will be some sort of SECRA
so there's a SECRA element to this which has its own timeline and set of activities that would have to take place. Once we actually come down to deciding what it is and what parts of it, we would want to implement. I'll just say that, the meeting 2 weeks ago was great, and I liked all the things that I heard. I think there's some huge benefits to the community, not to mention the earth. But I think the bigger question is capacity, the capacity of administration and our ability to handle how much of it and how soon. And I think, it's bigger than a bread box, right? So I think that we need to... I think we need to decide to do it. I think that there needs to be a committee that's dedicated to that, somewhat like a comprehensive plan committee, and it needs to have constituents that would be parties to any of the decisions that would be made by that group. It's a tremendous undertaking, and but it's going to take a while. And I think that for those of you who are thinking that it's all of a sudden, I know we're not going to have the rain gardens tomorrow. We have to get rid of the snow first, but. At the end of the day, I think this could be a multi-year project. I couldn't see this happening. I think a year and a half would be aggressive, to be quite honest with you. And because the whole SECRA process is that's a whole Megillah unto itself, from filings and meetings and public hearings and all the other parts are going on with it. But we do need to start, and I think that the most important thing to do is to get those constituents together and get the committee formed, because only then are we going to kind of understand the real scope of what's going to be affected and which parts of the code. And I think we got some really good information. But this is going to be a long-term thing in my view, and I certainly support it. But as Bob said, we got to start somewhere, and we got to plant our flag and decide this is something we're going to do. And I think village administration needs to kind of come to an understanding of how that's going to work as well. So.
Manuel, did you want to comment on it?
So one of the things that I wanted to follow up on with this committee, that I do think it was very successful when the village decided to solicit for committee members for the comprehensive plan. So it wasn't something that, people were sort of handpicked. It was actually community members that really wanted to be part of the comprehensive plan, because no matter what, we're going to need community members that are actually going to really do work, read the materials, show up to the meetings. And so we want somebody that's actually people that are going to be committed.
Yes.
So one thought was that I can work with Christina on putting together, some sort of language and then solicit for some potential community members, and we can identify types of stakeholders that we'd like on this particular committee, and then we'll see what, we can have a short time, window frame for submittals, and then go from there on who sends back a letter of interest or that type of thing.
Terrific.
And that was consistent with what we heard from, what was this, the Hastings, was that the community?
Hastings, yes.
Hastings, yeah. I mean, they're, again, they're smaller than we are, and then, of course, you've got Yonkers that's much bigger than we are, but, I think their approach was to get community involvement, and I think they had a kind of core group of people, I think it was 8 or 9 people that really just got down and rolled up their sleeves and figured out everything, and kind of drove the public conversation in terms of, what we're thinking about, what do people think about it, that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify what I said earlier. What I meant to say was that all the residents or the people who do apply to be on this committee, the majority will know, and I know that it's not just going to be, let's meet every week and talk about our ideas,
Right.
and so I just wanted everyone to know that we have a lot of partnering organizations and agencies and personnel here that are going to be guiding that committee and giving the committee as much, help and resources as we can to our extent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. So then as soon as you and Christina are able to put together an ad to put out in the Web Blast and whatever other avenues we can to try and solicit interest from the community, I think
Okay.
this board is clearly in favor of moving forward.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Okay, great, thank you. Next item for discussion is with respect to Market Square. The board had indicated that they would like to take whatever avenues are available to try to solicit public comment on those particular parcels of property and what the board and the residents, the public, the business might think might be a good use or some long-term plan for that. And as part of that, the village has engaged the folks who sponsor Mind Mixer, which is an opportunity to share questions and answers online, and Valerie is here to update the board and look for additional direction since the agreement has been signed and we are in agreement with these people to provide the service. So Valerie?
Okay. So, again, we now have the contract executed with Mind Mixer, so we're ready to start rolling out with some questions. And I think the first project that we were thinking of doing was really dealing with the Market Square public outreach. So I sort of put together an anticipated timeline for this particular project. The thought was that we'd have about 3 months of rollout questions on Mind Mixer with an anticipation public meeting on the results in June. And it's just ironic because I actually put these dates out, and then I heard subsequently that there was 2 work sessions, I think, that were identified for the public library.
Right.
So one, I think, was June 10th.
Correct.
So that ends up working well in the, as a
Perfect.
timeline. So then the thought was that depending on the outcome of the public meeting, we can obtain some additional input through MyMixer for additional month or so. Again, with anticipation of finalizing the process by August, and then we can hold one more public session on the final recommendations presented to the village board for you to consider for the RFP in September. And I think that was another work session.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where we'll be when we get to the September
Right.
23rd. I think it's the June 10th is like exactly as you said. It's an important milestone for us to say to the public, this is what you've told us in the first 3 months. It'll also be an opportunity to really hopefully make more people pay attention to what's been going on so that we can use the summer months to solicit some more input. Like this is what we came up with so far. These are the initial ideas.
Right.
This is the initial feedback. So we've got July and August to hone that message and to really get some final input from the public so that when we meet, it's September 23rd is when we have the public library again for a large community meeting on the subject. We may have some basic idea of what the RFP is going to include, but I think that is still an opportunity for us to be defining what we're hearing from the community and what we on the board are coming to recognize as the important things to highlight in the RFP that we'd like to put out
Right.
soon after that meeting.
Right.
So
that was sort of the timeline that I sort of laid out. And then I guess it really deals with now how this whole process would sort of unfold. The first thing I wanted to talk about was I believe that there was maybe a community committee that has been established for this project. And so I didn't know if this is an official community committee or how I will be, I guess, interfacing with that committee, or if for some reason, there isn't a community committee. So I guess that was my first question
Sure.
on how we're going to deal with that.
There's actually Andy Kaplan is a community member who's here today, and he met earlier this evening with some community members. And Andy, do you want to just come up and let folks know from the public how, if they would like to be part of, you're calling yourselves the markets. Here, we have to talk in the mic so the folks at home can hear you. And if there's an email address, if people want to reach out to you so that they can be more a part of this, just a grassroots community ad hoc committee that's come together to investigate what's working well in other communities, what ideas would you like to propose as residents of Ossining, what's going to bring you to our downtown, and what should we be looking to consider in a request for proposal. So.
I think you summed it up fairly well. We are a group. We're going to be known as the Market Square Alliance. We actually have not finalized an email address. Unfortunately, that is not done yet, but we will get something, and I guess we'll let you know, or somehow you guys can filter that out, or I'll come back in another week. Our goal is to just help facilitate ideas and thoughts and concepts, and what the public is really going to get behind, so that we can help the village find everybody from architects to builders to do things with Market Square that are going to be supported by the public here. So more details to come, I guess.
Thanks, Andy. So as far as if it's official committee, we are not interviewing and appointing people. This is an ad hoc community group that has come together in response to our call to the public to please solicit your ideas. So working together, hopefully they'll be able to coalesce some ideas and bring that to us for consideration.
So then when we have these public meetings, then I guess I assume that I will prepare my reports and my analysis, and then they'll prepare theirs to be presented. And did you want?
Sure. I think we can sort of see how it unfolds. I know that the folks in the community are not village planners, and they're not well versed in your expertise. And I know that Andy and the folks that he's partnering with are we talked about what a valuable resource, Valerie, that you are to help make sure that what they're looking at is something that's feasible and can work in Ossining, so that they're following a logical path of something that's going to be valuable for us to consider. So you seemed amenable to, in fact, you offered to be a resource and for folks to come to you to help with the process, right?
Right. So if there is, even if an ad hoc committee, because we've worked with ad hoc committees before, like Green Ossining, and, so my suggestion would be that maybe, after you get a little bit more established, reach out to me, and then maybe we can have a meeting on some ideas or concepts, because I think, first of all, like, it would be helpful for maybe everyone to understand, like, the zoning, or some of the issues that, we're facing down there, just from generalities, like the parking and those types of things. Because, clearly there's when you ask for community input, in general, it can run the gamut on the types of topics that you, especially in a site like this, you know, so you have, you know, your site plan issues, your architecture issues, you have your business type, you know, the uses issues. So there's a lot of different things. So, you know, and then also depending upon where they're sort of focusing, then I'll know what other items to sort of focus on. So, if, for example, they end up focusing more on just like concepts from other communities that they think are well, you know, have been implemented well, you know, then I can focus on like more of the detailed orientations of like what you would be dealing with on a site plan, and then also for an RFP, that type of thing.
Great.
And then, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say one concrete, tangible thing that role that committee can play right now is getting back to the item on the agenda, which is Mind Mixer,
Right.
and helping to craft questions that will
Right,
help
so-
solicit great input from the
Right.
community.
So that's the next thing. So if we are going to have, so I guess my thought was that I can initially come up with some initial basic questions to put on Mind Mixer that sort of actually even provide a little bit of feedback based off of the original consultant's designs and sketches, because let's start there, because that's where everybody was concerned with. And so let's start with where are the concerns and what are the issues, and then we can sort of flow from there. We can also bring in just other basic issues that the previous consultants didn't even address, you know, because they clearly talked about, you know, uses and generalities or amenities and generalities, and maybe we can start focusing a little bit more on what are some of the things that you want to see in like a public park or public space, or, you know, and then even just with other issues that people find in the downtown. So we can start macro and then start whittling it down to the more micro, depending upon the responses we get from the public. But if, you know, the committee wants to put forth questions, I'm sure our other boards then, you know, because I'm sure once people know that the public can funnel questions in, then other people, like your different board members and stuff, are also going to want to funnel questions in. So I think it might be best if we set up a process in which the questions sort of funnel in, because if not, then we're going to have a lot of different types of questions being posted. And really, at the end of the day, we want to have everybody focused on what it is that's going to go into the RFP. So I could potentially work with maybe some of the different community members that submit questions, and then work with Mind Mixer on how to tailor them so that we actually get the responses that they're looking for on this particular project.
Would it be possible to do another conference call with Mind Mixer? I mean, I know that they're a resource for us, so I know they're going to
Right.
answer the phone whenever we reach out. But if there are people who have self-identified as wanting to be helpful in this process, they might be more helpful if they understand more what Mind Mixer is going to recommend and how we approach them.
Okay.
So if there's a time that we can set up a conference call that maybe we can invite members from that community organization, perhaps HPC would be interested, or EAC, maybe some of the other self-identified groups that might want to understand better what this platform would be, so that they can be more effective contributors.
Sure.
John, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Valerie, that, you know, maybe as a place for you to start, you know, since you kind of have an understanding of the broader context, you know, maybe we could, you know, just create some areas of questioning, you know, whether it's concerning the zoning, whether it's concerning the visioning aspect of it, whether it's current state, you know, those kinds of things, to kind of maybe create some buckets for different questions to go in.
Right.
Just a general framework, nothing that couldn't change or move,
Right.
but we sort of need a place to start, and I think
Right.
that, you know, it might be helpful if you kind of created just a general framework, and then as the process evolves, the one thing I don't want to see happen is that we, you know, I don't want to take away public input, but I do think we need to get it out there too, because I think it's going to be like anything, it's going to have a life and an evolution of its own, and part of the process of using these kinds of tools is that you don't necessarily know what the outcome's going to be,
Right.
and it may be different than what you originally anticipated, and that's the good part of it. So I'm hesitant to want to spend too much time. You know, I'd like to see it be iterative.
Right.
You know, but we need to start somewhere, and I'd like to see us set some kind of timeline. Maybe not at this meeting, but we need to sort of draw a line in the sand. Okay, we're going to have a set of questions ready by X date, and maybe we could decide to either add or remove questions as the process goes on, as we see people start to respond.
Right, our actual count goes live on February 28th. So my thought was to have actually something prepared by the first week in March.
Great.
Just like a few initial questions to post onto the Mind Mixer.
Great.
And then from there, every week we can post a few more questions. And a lot of it, like you said, it will be based upon the responses that we start getting in from the community. If people start responding in one particular direction, then clearly we might want to ask more questions on,
Exactly.
their responses and get.
We'll get questions of the questions.
Right.
Oh, yeah. And that's part of the beauty of the software. So.
Right.
Trustee Herrera, did you want to comment?
I did. Thank you. Yeah, I would say this is very exciting. However, as John said, it will take life of its own. So an action plan on who determines what questions go on first and who submits them, I think that's great to bring up. The implementation of it, so a massive PR campaign between all the residents and everyone here at the board to let everyone know that they can go online and submit their opinions and answer questions and get involved and really make sure that all the groups and residents know. I think that'll be key. Maybe we could even use our PR firm to help us out with that. To officially launch our Mind Mixer for Market Square. And then my second part was groups that will help you through the Mind Mixer implementation. It's very exciting to have a group that's focusing on Market Square. I am part of that, and it's great to see it grow. But I also want to make sure that you would know that there's also many other groups in Ossining. So an equitable process to make sure that everyone is helping you, or do you just want one group, or do you want the board to pick,
Well, truthfully, I think it can become unwieldy if you have too many groups throwing in questions, because the concept is you really want to get to an end result. And so, you sort of want to start with even a topic, and then you kind of whittle down on a particular topic. So if for some reason people do, that's why I was sort of suggesting that if people do have a particular question that they want to see posted, that they kind of funnel it through my office, because then I can take a look at it and see maybe it's been answered, or maybe it's, right, or maybe we want to answer it a different way, or maybe we want to throw in a couple other options to that, and then that way we can sort of make sure it's an iterative process, because I am sure that a lot of these groups, once they start seeing questions and seeing responses, they're also going to come up with additional questions that they might not have thought of originally.
But those questions would all be funneled through your office.
Right.
So it would just now. It looks like we have about 2.5 weeks left in the month. So that seems like plenty of time to have an initial conversation with Mind Mixer and get prepared so that March 1st we have an
Absolutely.
exciting
And
first
if
set
for
of
some
questions.
Right,
and-
absolutely. And if for some reason the committee already has some questions that they wanted to see, up front, they can absolutely send them to me, because again, we can take a look at them, and maybe some are great as initial questions, and then maybe some will be great as like second round or third round questions. So
Sounds great.
Before you go, I think it's very important that the Chamber of Commerce, I don't know if they're involved, but the Chamber of Commerce is a major stakeholder in this. And I think Ingrid Richards, who's our downtown development manager,
Yes.
should also be involved. And I don't know how that interface will be, but the business community is key. And so I imagine you'll be incorporating them into this, yes?
Well, so
Just checking.
I will be reaching out to Ingrid to see if she has anything. I'm not going to be able to contact every possible committee or community member, types of, that sort of, this board, you have your liaisons to the different communities. That would be very helpful if you can do that. We can clearly do it on the web blast. We can, and then if people have specific questions that they can, definitely send it to me. I know, Gail was here, so, and Omar is also has a connection with the chamber, right? So I think that we'll definitely make sure that the business community is involved, and I would think that this has been sort of publicized now for a little bit, that we're about to unroll this program. So
Great.
I would think a lot of people would be able to, who are interested, will send in questions.
And just to add on that, I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, and I know I could speak for the Downtown Development Committee and also the Chamber. They do welcome all members from the public to help them out when it comes to the majority of their outreaches and events and projects that they do. I know one of them you could join, which is, the Austin Chamber. Another one is a community group that, if you're a resident, they can just, I'm assuming, contact you, Andy, and just join and be a part of that process. My biggest challenge, which is for all groups, is to make sure that 3 groups that are doing kind of very similar work are on the same page and work together. So that's kind of just something that the board and the leaders and all the groups, I'm looking forward to, hopefully with Mayor Garrity and the board and some other Ossining residents, get all those key stakeholders into a room and kind of get a concise understanding, and then maybe report to you or invite you to that meeting, because I think that's what we have 3 great groups right now, and you never know, you may have another group that wants to focus on programming for Market Square within mind.
Right.
The possibilities are endless, so it's really exciting, but it's also to make sure that the 3 main groups that we have right now that are structured, organized, and pretty professional in how they run are those 3 groups. So to make sure that they all work together is very exciting, and hopefully will come to be.
Right, no, absolutely. And I think, again, I just want to make it clear that my goal in this is to get this board with recommendations that are ultimately go in the request for proposal. And so a lot of request for proposals, don't get unless you're gonna go in and say, we only want this type of business, we're only gonna go after that type of business, you're gonna get a very wide range of, responses and ideas. And even when you go out for request for proposal, you might set boundaries in that request for proposal, but you're not necessarily going to, typically you don't say it can only be 1 story or this many, we want this many retail establishments, we want this much square. It's a lot different than that on a lot of these requests for proposals. So I think my questions are going to be more broader, more like macro to some extent. You're not necessarily going to get into what color brick do you want. Like those are the things that you deal with during the actual approval process as opposed to a request for proposal process. So I think, so it depending on, other community groups might want to talk about very micro type of questions or issues or businesses or really dealing with, like you were saying, programming space. You're not really going to be dealing with programming space in a request for proposal. You will be dealing with more of what is that developer going to make use of that land and how they're going to build and with their building envelopes and that type of situation. So I think some of the community groups can talk about uses and businesses and programming and stuff like that, but I think a lot of, and that's going to be slightly different than some of the questions you're going to be asked to actually create your recommendations for a request for proposal.
Yeah, there's 2 different conversations going on here. There's the conversation around, what's the use of the property? What do we want that structure to look like? How much is public? How much is retail? How much is, all those different things are going to be part of the discussion. The programmatic elements of it, if there is going to be something programmatic, well, then there needs to be a space where that programmatic activity can take place. So with respect to the RFP and what we're moving towards, I'm sure that a lot of people are going to put contribute things to this that won't speak directly to the RFP itself, but will speak to the purpose of the RFP in terms of what we want to have there and what are the programmatic things that would be important to have there, and what's the structure going to look like that's going to deliver that to the community. So and that's why I'm hesitant to spend too much time worrying about it, and more like, let's push it out there and let's see what comes back. Let's see what other questions come out of the process.
Right.
So I really, I'm very encouraged by this piece of software. I think it's going to be a wonderful community dialogue. So.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's going to be out there in the community. So I think the community is definitely going to respond, and we'll be able to help the community come to conclusions.
Well said, John. And Valerie, I really appreciate you bringing this suggestion to us because we on the board recognized that the community input in this process is essential, and going through a traditional approach of bringing in consultants and doing a couple of charrettes didn't seem comprehensive enough, and also was extremely expensive.
Right.
So this is a more interactive way, and it can address a lot of more opportunities for us to engage the public more broadly going forward as well. So thank you so much for bringing this to us, and I really look forward to learning more about how Mind Mixer is going to serve us well in Ossining and how we can get more people engaged, not only in the process of soliciting questions, which is what we ended up talking about a lot tonight, but in responding to those questions so that we have some really rich information when we meet in June, because I think we are all in agreement that whatever we put in these properties that have been vacant for 40 years, that's going to set us up for the next several generations to come here in the community. And whatever development we invite into that space is going to be the cornerstone of our revitalized downtown. And we want it to be something that is uniquely Ossining. So this is going to be a very exciting process. Thank you so much for leading us through it, and I look forward to the March 1st launch of Mind Mixer.
You're welcome.
Actually, I do have a couple of comments.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Valerie.
No, that's fine.
A couple things that they have to, the public as a general, and we have to realize as a board that I think that's something that we briefly touched on, but I think we have to kind of work backwards of where we want it to be. And I think is, when do we want the RFP to go out? And kind of work from there to kind of set our goals and the timeline in a way. Do we want the RFP to go out at the end of the year? Do we want it to go out sometime next year? And from that, I think it will help Valerie to kind of draw a line and be like, this is when these questions are to be done and move to the next phase. The other part that I think is needed and is necessary for the public to understand, this board, except for one, sorry, Omar, we did pay a lot of money for a consultant firm last year to give us the understanding of what is allowable on this property. They gave us three options. We ended up filtering down to three options. Those three options, one of them is to change zoning on our property. So we know what is allowable. We know what we can have there. Now, how do we get to where we want to be? That's what we're doing now. But we have the tools. We have all the studies that was done. So I think that should be key for the community, to all the community boards that are being formed or that are already formed, to utilize those tools and to kind of put that together and work from there. Don't start from scratch. We already paid somebody else to do all the work for us. So use those and use that as a tools. We do have architectural guidelines. Use those. That we're going to be using that as well. I'm sure Valerie's going to be using that. I think the other part of this whole thing is we need to clone Valerie, at least 2-3 more Valeries I think we need in our planning department. Because some of the topics that we have here, she's actually in all of them, I think. So I thank you, Valerie, and your staff, I think.
And Valerie.
And Valerie, for all the hard work and everything that you've been doing for the village of Ossining. So I know it's going to be a lot of work.
Yes.
So embrace yourself.
Yes, well,
Get ready, set, go.
There's more to come next month on other projects. So.
Thanks, Valerie.
It sounds like, Valerie, like you were interested in starting off the questions with reminding the public of what the consultants did present to us as, and that is a very important tool for us to understand. If a developer were to come into this space, how they would like to, using their approach and formulas to in general for how development would be done in that kind of a setting and that square footage, what a developer would seek to do. And that's an important tool, an important piece of information that we now have.
Right.
And so that's on the table, and now we're doing the other part of the process.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
Don't we already have a date for the RFP to go out that we're aiming for?
yes, which would be the end of September.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. So the next item is sort of a continuation of a discussion that's been taking place with respect to the Urban Renewal Agency, which the Village of Ossining had in place and which has not been used for quite some time, and it's a question of how the board would like to proceed with respect to revitalizing it or letting it lapse as it sort of has over time. So Council Lori Lee Dixon has been looking into it, as well as Valerie, again, as a planning part of it. So.
Sure. At this point, we're looking for a consensus as to next steps because we're really at the point where we need to go right or left. And being in the middle is no longer acceptable. So if we could get some guidance on how you would like for us to focus our energies vis-a-vis the Urban Renewal Agency, we would be ever so grateful.
Right, I sort of outlined, I mean, unfortunately, it's not we sort of have two choices. We either choose to dissolve the agency, and then Lori and I will work on the process and start on what all that entails, or we choose to reestablish the agency. But if we do that, I would have to say that we probably would need to engage some sort of consulting firm or somebody else that is familiar with the way the plans are made in some of the other communities that have the urban renewal agencies, and then to actually, look at what it is that we need to do and start all that work. And that's probably going to be much more time consuming than I would be able to devote to it. So we probably would need to have somebody come in from the outside, and also with the expertise of what would need to be involved in establishing an urban renewal agency.
We need to look comprehensively. We need to look at the bylaws and make sure they're still relevant, and then we'd also need to look at the plan. There's an actual plan in place that's on file, so we need to look at that plan and update it to today. And also there is the matter of budgetary information and an audit to provide those kinds of reports, the plan, the bylaws, to Albany,
Right.
which that report at this point is in arrears. So we'd be willing to work with a consultant and assist you to get that moving and getting it up and running, but it would entail consensus to move in that direction.
Do you want to start, Bob?
Yeah. This thing has been dormant for an awfully long time, and the village has been chugging happily along without it. We are having tremendous budget restraints with the tax cap and the 1% a year for the next 3 years cut that we have to implement. Starting a whole nother agency and having to commit staff, which means we'd have to hire people because, frankly, I don't think that our staff can do more than they're doing. Valerie's got 27 different things to do every single day. Doesn't have enough help. You're backed up with work. I think everybody on this extraordinary village staff is making Herculean efforts to keep us financially secure. And given that the Urban Renewal Program has not shown any interest in money coming to us for it, it looks to me like an extra thing that we're going to have to find money to pay for that we don't need. So I'm all in favor of doing the work that needs to be done to dissolve the agency and make it go away. Thank you.
Would you like to finish?
Yes.
Trustee Herrera?
Yes, I completely agree with Trustee DeRayo. After doing some reading, and I even spoke to some people about the pros and cons of the agency, I just at this particular time, with how our budget looks like and the many challenges that this board will have for the next, I would say, 5 years, which are only going to get worse, unfortunately, when it comes to just how Albany's functioning or lack thereof, right? It's not in the best interest of the Village of Ossining to start a new agency, and even we could barely even fund or operate to get out of the dormant stage that we're in. So I would have to agree to dissolve the agency here in the village. Thank you.
Trustee Codman?
Yeah, I agree with Bob and what's been said so far.
I don't see, we do not have the capacity for this. And, you know, I think one of the things that I took away from, I think we discussed it in the last legislative session, is that, you know, a lot of these urban renewal agencies did have the benefit of money that was given by the federal government, and then that money was loaned, and it became a revolving source of revenue, so that it was literally self-perpetuating. And I mean, I could see, I mean, if we had the resources and we were able to park this to the side, it might have some purpose. But, you know, given all the things that we're challenged with, I would have to agree with Omar and Bob that we were going to have to let it go. And as such, we're going to have to spend time and resources just to unravel the thing. You know, I mean, don't we need to get, doesn't the legislature have to vote on it?
Yeah, we would need to take a home rule message
Yeah,
as a village.
I mean-
And we'd also need to, there are two small pieces of property which the Urban Renewal Agency Board, you would need to convene as a board after public notice and vote to actually convey those two small pieces of property back to the village.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
And then a home rule message, which would be a resolution of the Board of Trustees.
Trustee Quesada?
Yes. So it'll be on our legislative session for next week?
Do you have
Well,
any comment?
you can certainly vote to take the home rule message. You know, of course, that'll take some time to develop those, but you can authorize the pertinent staff to start that process, of
No, I
course.
think I agree with Bob. And not only that, but we have all the great stuff that's going on in the village of Austin right now that we need to concentrate, we need to focus and put all our effort into that to start something new. Not really new, but restart something that has been there sleeping for a long time. So I agree, we should just dissolve this.
Well, I agree we should dissolve it. I'm not sure that I come to the conclusion for exactly the same reasons, although all of the points that have been made about the time and money to reinvigorate this and make it relevant again are certainly extremely valid points. But I was very hesitant to dissolve this agency because I didn't want to eliminate the options for it to function in a valuable way going forward. And so, fortunately, we've had a few conversations on this now, and Valerie and Lori Lee have done a lot of research to help us understand what this agency is empowered to do beyond what we as a board are empowered to do is really quite limited. It has to do with taking ownership of land through condemnation.
Yes.
The agency could, which the village wouldn't do.
No, the village
Village
would
could do, but we don't like to because it's unseemly.
You have the absolute power and right to take property by eminent domain, and once you've done that, then you could transfer that
Right. It's
legally, lawfully to the Urban Renewal Agency for programmatic processing.
Okay, but that's not a power that I don't think any of us really are looking to take advantage of. And then the other thing was that they can go out and borrow money,
Right.
Them separate from.
They
from
can
the
take
village.
on obligations which would not go toward your maximum cap. You
Right.
could- yeah.
But there was little else beyond that at this point, since it's not a currently functioning agency. So because I don't see a lot of value to if it were to exist right now, I can wholeheartedly take the same position as my colleagues. So whatever we need to do to move this forward, please do.
So that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is a further discussion on complete streets. The village board has had a number of opportunities to discuss this matter and to consider the prospect of complete streets, and council and the planner have had an opportunity to look into it as well, so additional direction is needed, and then next steps in terms of implementing the program. So, Laura Lee?
Valerie has prepared an excellent and comprehensive Excel spreadsheet which talks about the other communities and the standards by which they govern their complete streets policy.
Right, so I'll just touch base on that and then.
And then we can talk
hand
about
it
the
over to
resolution.
Lori for the resolution. So what we did was we actually looked at all the various complete streets resolutions that were passed throughout New York State, and we looked at what standards they referred to in the resolution. So you received, basically you received an Excel sheet that identifies each one of the standards, or the different standards that each community referred to in their resolution for complete streets. And then we also took a look at, some of the other, we looked at the National Complete Streets Coalition's websites, and we looked at some of the other websites, and we really do believe that the four main organizations that we should refer to in the Complete Streets resolution, it deals with AASHTO, which is the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, New York State Department of Transportation, United States Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, particularly their Office of Safety, and then the National Complete Streets Coalition, all of which have, even in the New York State Department of Transportation, has its own complete streets standards and complete streets guidelines. So does the Federal Highway Administration, and then AASHTO is just your basic standards, but they're always updating their standards to reflect a lot of the complete streets concepts and ideas. And then the National Complete Streets Coalition, which also always highlights some of the more interesting initiatives that are taking place throughout the United States. So we thought that those would be the four main standards that we'd want to refer to. And I also touched base with our village engineer, Paul Fraioli, who would be clearly involved in implementation of this. And he was also familiar with these different standards and was, in support of referring to them in the resolutions.
So you'd like to refer to all four of those that
Yes,
you
all four of
referenced?
those
Because I see
would
that
be-
some municipalities do one or two or three
Yes,
or
and you
their
know what,
own.
and the thing is, a lot of municipalities, there are more municipalities that refer to more than one of these. And some of them refer to two, but not three of them.
Right.
But when you actually go, I actually went to their websites and I provided you the websites as well. You will see that there really is a lot of good information and good standards and a lot of different, especially dealing with different types of scenarios that I think would be beneficial if that we just use those as general standards to refer to.
Great, thank you.
So what I did, once Valerie did her research and we met again and discussed the potential for adopting a resolution, for consideration for you to adopt a resolution, I went through the handbook of the coalition and pulled out the 5 essential elements that they say a good complete streets policy should include. And so I carefully went through and used language from the actual policies that they noted in their on their website as being excellent examples of policies that hit one or more of these elements. And I tried to incorporate that into a resolution, a draft resolution, for your discussion and consideration. And you can see in the action section, in the resolve section, I took Valerie's research and distilled it in the be it further resolved, the last be it further resolved clause. I've distilled it and included that we should consider best practices, whatever they may be, but they may be evidenced by these guidelines and criteria, and they also may be evidenced by other outside sources or also our own comprehensive plan, and that kind of thing. So I didn't limit it in any way. I tried to make it as broad as possible to provide an opportunity when it's in the right context and given the circumstances, we can be sure that we're including consideration of these items. So that's how I drafted it. I tried to draft it with some flexibility and with an eye toward including language from the best elements that was that I found on the coalition's website. They have an excellent list and sample language from the sort of the best of 2013, 2014. You know, they've got a review of every policy that's been enacted, which was very helpful in drafting this. So I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at the language to see if it doesn't go far enough, if it goes too far, and I would welcome comments and we could make any changes.
I have to say this. this is a wonderful piece of work you did right here. I looked at some of the sites myself, and you hit everything, absolutely everything. I think this is a beautiful resolution. That said, there are two things in the be it further resolved that I would like to suggest.
The first one or the second one?
The second one. The
Okay.
one- Yeah, not the last one, the second to last
Okay.
thing there.
Okay.
I suggest that you add that shall be include consideration of best practices may be evidenced by the guidelines and criteria such as those in our comprehensive plan
Okay.
and the Americans with Disability Act. And other than those two additions, I am thrilled with this piece of work. It could not be better. Well done.
And I'm gonna just follow up on that ADA, comment, because some communities actually did identify the ADA, but a lot of the, and that's fine, we can, it's not, like, it's just a little bit, I just want this board to understand that a lot of these other AASHTO and New York State Department of Transportation, United States, they automatically include the ADA guidelines into their complete streets policies, but this would also just clearly show an emphasis and importance of ADA.
Okay.
But that was taken into consideration, and that's why I dropped it, because the ADA requirements usually are in those particular standards.
So including that language wouldn't change the de facto implementation of it, but it
exactly.
would
No.
identify
But it-
that this is something that we
That you
value.
value.
That we
Okay.
value very much, yes.
Right.
Great.
Okay.
Any other comments?
So,
Thank you, Lori.
Would you like me to add that language and actually put this on for consideration at your legislative session, or would you like me to add that language and then return to the next
No.
work session?
no, I think, my personal opinion is I think we can go forward. It's only two small things. But what do you guys think?
No, I think that those minor comments would be great. And for anybody who's joining us and doesn't know what we're talking about a complete streets policy in the Village of Ossining. The complete streets policy was implemented by New York State a few years ago, and it has been put into place in some counties in New York State and in several municipalities. And the intention of it is to make our roadways safer for all users, cars, trucks, pedestrians, cyclists, the elderly, people with strollers, and it would make it easier for people who live half a mile from downtown to perhaps want to walk into downtown. So that also supports our economic vitality and also our health. Communities that are more walkable have healthier residents who are have less health concerns because they don't need to drive absolutely everywhere they go.
And it's
So-
better for the environment.
And it's better for the environment, and it alleviates any perceived
Right.
parking problems we may have a little bit. So, all great reasons for us to implement this policy.
Right. And again, just a reminder, it doesn't mandate action by the village. What it means is any project that comes forward which has a component that's appropriate to address this, we will bring it through with the review. This policy now will be sort of a mandate in terms of a portion of the review. So if you would come forward with a project that was adjacent to a street or a roadway or a right-of-way in any fashion, as a part of the review of that project, the reviewing agencies and the planner and the Department of Public Works would need to look carefully at the standards and guidelines and best practices.
So, are we good to go for next week with this? Because I'm not clear.
I think we are.
Okay.
You're talking about like adding two phrases to language
right.
as is. Unless there's any further suggestions via email in the next week, then it can go on our agenda.
I'd like to put it on the agenda. And again, reminder to the public that there's always a portion where you accept comments from the public on the resolution, so people will have an opportunity to come forward, and you can tweak it right up to the point where you take action or don't take action.
Terrific.
Yay.
So
Yes?
we'll post it for the public's review a couple days before.
be on the agenda.
Perfect.
Hooray.
And if folks haven't noticed, we've been making a real effort in village government to get the agenda out by Friday afternoons, which means there may more often be amended agendas on a Monday or Tuesday because things come up. But that gives all of us on the board and the community a couple extra days over the weekend to take a look at the agenda and see if you want to make time to join us on a Wednesday evening for comment.
Okay, thank you so much. The next item, the village did receive a grant from the New York State for the design, engineering, and permitting of the dock. It was a matching grant. The village was to put up $21,500 to be matched by the state. As a part of that, the village also applied for the actual construction monies to allow the grant to be built. Although the village, I beg your pardon, to allow the dock to be built. Although the grant we received the grant for the design and engineering. This year, the grant was not approved for the construction. Valerie and I had sort of an exit interview with the state to see, what their status was, what the basis was, so that the board could move forward with a decision in terms of whether you wanted to complete the design, et cetera, with the prior grant. And the state indicated in no uncertain terms that the grant application for the construction was rated very high. However, there is a certain emphasis on projects being ready to go, and in fact, the design, et cetera, has to be completed. So there will be another cycle. We did have an opportunity to speak, and they were very encouraging. So with that, I'll turn it to Valerie.
Right,
So we get to say, "What's up, Doc?" Had to be done. Had to be done.
So, I'm here tonight because when we received information that the original, or the second round, we did not receive funding for the actual construction of the dock, we thought it'd be best to kind of regroup, talk to the state, see what, the intentions are, because we didn't necessarily want to have, while the design, permitting, and engineering grant is, we're only getting $21,000 from the state, and, GDC has committed to matching that grant from originally when we first submitted it. So clearly it's not really as a cost to the village, but it is a cost in staff time. It will be a cost in outreach, community involvement, that whole thing. So, we wanted to see what were the chances are that we actually see this through to fruition. So as village manager said, we spoke to the state, and they did say that our application scored very high. It was just slightly shy of being funded, and mostly because we didn't actually have construction drawings submitted to the state. Now, I just wanted to we didn't actually get the contract to actually design this dock until the fall. So there was just no way we were even going to be able to have had the construction drawings before that time. So now that we have the contract, we're about to execute it with the state. And so the concept is to, if we are going to move forward with this and then try to resubmit for the construction, that we're going to really move forward quickly with this particular project. I did have Ed Weinstein, we brought him to a work session previously to introduce him, and he was going to be the consultant that's going to work on the design. So if this board is interested in moving forward and still committed to the construction portion of this project, that we will have, I can have, next steps would be reach out to Ginsberg Development Corporation as well as Edward Weinstein and start getting him his proposal already, get that back to the board, and then we actually start moving forward with this project. This project will include stakeholder meetings. I already received a phone call from the Austin Boat and Canoe Club. So it clearly is going to involve people that have interest in the waterfront and what is going to take place and how it's going to affect their particular properties and the different mooring fields and everything like that. And there actually will be some work in the background that Lori Lee is going to have to help me with that deals with the land underneath the dock, make sure we have the proper titles and everything. We'll probably have to do a title search. So there is a lot of background work that needs to start taking place with this particular project. And then clearly we would need to start moving forward with it as quickly as possible.
And what's the timeline for the next phase of grant proposals by when we
They
need this?
anticipated, based on the conversation, somewhere between around June, May, June, something like that. So if we have, again, I don't know for sure, but if we are clearly in the middle of the design and we can at least show we have some better estimated costs, we can have an idea of where we're going with the design, that we should probably, hopefully, pass that threshold and get it funded this time around. Go ahead, John.
So it's a 50-50, right?
Yeah.
So our share, the state share is $21,500.
Yes.
And then we would commit 21,500?
No, Ginsburg's going to
Ginsburg.
match that.
Oh, so Ginsburg's going to match the other half. Okay,
Right.
so that
They-
explains the,
right.
so that explains the letter that
Letter
we
we
got
got.
from.
Yes.
Okay.
I did,
Yeah.
well, when I had to meet
Okay.
with, I met with Martin about a week ago, because we're dealing with, there's a lot of site plan elements
Okay.
on his site, and one of the things that was brought up was the dock grant, and I told him, I said, well, I'm bringing it back to the board, because the board has to decide whether to move forward with it, and
So,
he had concerns, and I said, well, if you have concerns, then write a letter to the board, so, that's what he,
Yeah, I mean, I see no reason not to move forward. I mean, I think that, we just want to make sure that everything gets, I mean, if GDC is going to own the other half of it, so that's great. I mean, the only concern that I would have would just make sure that the cost of whatever we're doing isn't over and above the matching amount. I mean, I would guess that if it did, that would be on Mr. Ginsburg to
that
take care
would
of
be
the
on Mr.
decision.
Ginsburg,
So-
but we are
Okay.
gonna, we
Okay.
do need to kind
Yeah,
of
I
keep
just
it
want to
in-
make sure we're
Right.
protected,
But-
from that perspective. But, I saw Martin's letter, and obviously, we feel the same way. We want to see this happen, so.
Right.
Good,
I have questions.
please.
Okay, I have a couple of design questions here that you probably don't have the answers to, but I'd like to get back. How many slips are they proposing? Would be a question. And what's the length of the vessels that will go in the slips? The large docking area at the front of the project?
Right.
What's the largest vessel that will be able to safely tie up there? And what is the depth of the water along the finger docks and by the front of the dock for the large boat? So depths and length overall, and how many slips?
Right, so I'll go back to this design concept. This design concept came about, this is going back a number of years ago, when the MTA was actually initially looking to extend their ferry dock. And originally they were gonna extend it straight. And there was the community group that came out and said, why don't we move it on an angle? So with the concept that eventually we'll go out straight, we'll have floating docks, we'll have, a fixed pier. The concept was to be able to get the clear water in. The concept is to get as many slips as possible. So that concept came about as sort of the community and the village board, sort of saying, okay, this is our general concept that we want to go with. This is not set in stone, because a lot of it, that's why part of it's going to be the stakeholder meeting, and maybe you would definitely be interested in weighing in or coming to those meetings.
Very much so.
Because, clearly this is going to have to involve what it is that we want down there and what it is that we actually want designed. Because you can really design anything. Clearly, there's going to be a budget that we're going to want to stay within. I think initially we thought, the last go-around, we submitted about a $580,000 dock budget. So I think we're going to try to want to stay in that range. But I think if people have ideas, because I know, and I clearly, like I said, I've already gotten phone calls from a couple of community members based off of the agenda tonight. So there's also going to be, clearly, people are going to want to weigh in on that as well.
Right. I think that the questions that I'm asking
Right.
will help us make some of those decisions.
Absolutely.
Because,
Right, I don't know how much, we do have some bathymetry data, but I don't know how recent it is and how accurate it is, so that some of the stuff that we will have to take a look at. definitely.
yes, it's, I guess, those questions would need to be answered, I guess, as part of the moving
Right.
forward on this, the grant project, right?
Yeah,
This is when those questions will be answered.
right.
As,
right,
as
we
part of,
start
as
moving
part of the design, he's
process,
going to need
right.
to know that information,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
So,
all.
so Valerie, when any stakeholder meetings are being scheduled, I think it's really important that Trustee Durayo, as the liaison and also the person who understands this way better than most of us, is that we check with his schedule so he can be sure to be part of
Yes.
those meetings.
I
Yes.
appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Actually, I have a quick question.
Oh, okay, wait. Trustee
Valerie.
Sada has a
Oh,
question.
sorry.
You said the next part of the next time this application is going to be coming up is in June.
Yeah,
It's
about
pretty
that.
much summer.
Right.
The reason why we weren't sort of granted the grant is because we kind of didn't have construction documents ready.
Right.
So we are pretty much, I can say we're in March. So March, we don't have that much of a frame time to do
No.
this CD set, so to
Right.
speak, to be ready.
Right.
So what, I guess my question is, and I know because you've been here all evening with us, how does that working out for you and schedule-wise, time-wise?
Well, right, this particular, because we'll have an outside consultant working on this, that can help move the timeline a little bit faster.
Okay.
My thought was to actually have, contact him, have an initial public meeting with the number of the stakeholders, like sometime in March, just to get general ideas, start off with this as the platform and, see what the comments come back as. And then I am hoping that the fact that we actually have an executed agreement with the state, that the state actually gave funding for this concept of the Sing Sing prison, that we would actually be in the midst of construction and have maybe better idea of what it is that we're proposing to do and have better, more accurate construction numbers, costs, that the state would then consider that as the last, piece to the threshold and give us, and be able to award us the funds.
Yeah.
So it sounds like they just want, the state just wants to see progress, right? In other words,
Right.
they want to see an engagement in the design process.
Right.
Okay.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Well, I mean,
Laura.
that's what they're telling us now.
So
Yeah.
we want to get as far along this process, so we have the
Yeah.
very best story to tell in June, so that this all moves forward
And
smoothly
just to let you know,
now,
I did
swimmingly.
meet with Chris Soy the other day.
Oh, good.
To also speak to him about this project. I mean, clearly, it's too far out to really, but I know, I did tell him that originally when we submitted it last year, the thought was some of that was going to come, some of the funds were going to come from the recreation fund. So I didn't want to surprise him, and I, did speak to him about the project and stuff like that. So he clearly wants to be interested, he wants to be involved in the process of this, because he figures at some point programming and fees and all that fun stuff is going to funnel through his office. So he will also be part of this process.
Terrific, thank you.
Thank you, Laurie.
All right, thank you.
We are almost on time.
Okay, and the second to last item on the agenda is an update, proposed local law from council. It deals with notice provisions and enforcement issues under the code.
Yes. If you recall, we've had a number of conversations about the inability of the village to enforce, on behalf of the state, the uniform state codes, as a result of the fact that the Secretary of State and the Department of State had not enacted certain time frames and guidelines within which compliance is necessary. So as a result of their inaction, we have been foreclosed from taking an order to remedy through to an actual enforcement locally. So based upon emergency rulemaking and proposed rulemaking which mirrors the emergency rule which has been put into place, we need to recognize that these timeframes now exist, and we need to acknowledge them as being the basis upon which we are enforcing the state uniform codes. So yes, you can see I've drafted for your consideration a revision to your Chapter 91, which is the chapter that the village recognized the applicability and the enforceability of the state uniform codes years ago. What we're doing is we're adding a Section B to this, which recognizes that rulemaking is now in place. Those rules are set forth in 19 NYCRR 1203, and ETSEC is just a legal term that means "and thereafter." So if they were to change it from subsection 5 to subsection 4, we wouldn't have to revisit this. So the only other caution, and there might be a slight tweak that I'd like to make after a discussion tomorrow with NICOM, is that NICOM has also proposed an actual legislative fix which would revise the statute, not the regulation. So if we go back to the statute, the fact that the statute required this Department of State to take this action without giving local municipalities any flexibility, they've now proposed, and I would like to send that proposed statutory fix out to you tomorrow. That would take a year it may not get through both houses sufficient and then up to the governor to sign. It's not going to happen in the next month or 2 months or 3 months. And in the meantime, we should move forward and recognize that this rulemaking has taken place. So I will get the proposed revision, legislative provision out to you that Wade Beltramo sent to me today. It also asks, Wade has asked if the village could provide support of their efforts to get this legislation fixed by communicating directly with our legislators in both houses. So what I would like to do when I send it out tomorrow is draft a quick little 1 or 2 paragraph letter for your consideration, and maybe if there's a consensus, we could actually put that on village letterhead and have the board execute it in support of that. But first thing is I want to get that out to you so you can see how NICOM is proposing we fix it, which is legislatively as opposed to in a regulation. It would be actual statutory fix, which would be a much better fix.
Trustee
But-
Dry?
If I may ask, is there language you can add to this that addresses that, I'm making this up, I'm not a lawyer, that says if the state legislature subsequently makes a statutory fix, it will automatically become part of this law?
That is, I can do that. That's what I meant, that I would like to tweak this second paragraph to reflect the fact.
Great,
If-
please do.
If the mandate is no longer necessary, we recognize that, the statute would govern in the place of that.
Any other questions or concerns on this?
And keep in mind that you can tweak the local law up to the point you adopt it. So I'd like to put a resolution on next week calling for that public hearing, and then we can tweak it in the next few weeks so it's ready to go.
Good.
So we're going to call for a public hearing for this local law
Yes.
at our and you want that on the legislative session to call for the hearing?
That would be helpful.
Okay.
All right,
Fine-
great.
fine with me.
Anybody else? I'm sorry.
I think we've got executive
Okay.
session covered.
Okay, good. The last item, it's sort of a late starter. We had, in accordance with your requests and instructions, we've confirmed with the Clearview School for their 5K that they want to have on May 17th. So we worked that through the police department. I've spoken to them, and so that's good to go. Ironically, the same day we were meeting to speak about that, we got another request from a new running club up in Croton who wants to have an event too. However, the funny part was it was the exact same day, and it's like, so they're going to go back to the drawing board, and we expect them to come back. But for right now, you have the one on May 17th with the Clearview, and then we also received a request from the Tough Man group race, and so Christina has been looking into that. So
The Tough Man is a triathlon. This would be the 8th year that it's being held, and how it affects the village is that portions of 9A are closed. Previously, it wasn't a big deal because there was only a very small section of 9A that was in the village, and we closed the ramps and things like that. So that's how we assist it. This year, it's different because we're providing police services. So we're a little more involved. The County of Westchester is still the organization coordinating road closures and all those things and traffic impacts. So we wanted to bring this to the board just so that they were aware of it. It's Sunday, September 13th, and to find out if the board had any objections. 5:30 a.m. to around 1 p.m. And the race is over at 3, so they expect all the road closures to be done completed way before then. 3 is the last person kind of rolling back into Croton Point. So before we continue with the race organizer, wanted to check if the board had any questions, comments, or concerns with regard to this event.
I just wanted to clarify, I know this has happened before, and I don't think that we've had any problems. The only difference now is that because we provide police services to the unincorporated part of the town, the police department would be asked to be a little bit more involved because
Yes.
there's a little more area that we would be
So
assisting with.
previously, it was kind of confined to our police closing ramps. So it was minimally involved, minimal cost. So this will be an additional cost, which we will be negotiating with the organizer to recoup those costs for police services to close that area. But again, the county is doing a lot of it. because of how it falls. It's in the county park. It's county roads and things like that. They are the lead agency. So we are not the primary police department. We would be working with other departments, and again, we would be seeking reimbursement for the cost that is incurred to close the ramps or to detour traffic.
Yeah, so in the past, the town would have had something to say about this, right? So is the town know this is going on?
The town,
Because I mean, it's.
because it goes through there.
Well, yeah, it goes through the town. So I mean, I mean, if there's an economic impact, then I would expect the town to understand that, and that would be communicated to them, and that with respect to the IMA and.
The the town indicated they didn't have any issues with the race occurring.
Okay.
Again, we were looking at recouping any financial cost from the race organizer. They are a not-for-profit 501(c), but there are people do sign up and they pay a registration fee and things like that, and they do charge that to make these allowances and
Sure.
keep everyone safe and those type of
I
things.
just want to make sure we're talking to the
With the
town.
yes.
And that we're in conversation with them about this. I mean, I have no objection to it if we're going to get reimbursed for for whatever services we provide.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I believe that's the last item on the agenda, and there are a number of resolutions that have been noted here, and there'll be some added as we discussed this evening. So I'll turn it back to the chair.
Well, I think that this has been an incredibly productive evening. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you will join us either on television, online, or in person next week, which will be February 18th. We'll be back at 8688 Spring Street at the courthouse for our regular meeting at 7:30. Thank you very much.